بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه إلى يوم الدين. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل وألهمنا رشدنا يا رب العالمين. Alhamdulillah. In our lessons on Maraqi al-Falah by the great Imam Abu al-Ikhlas Hassan ibn Ammar al-Shurungulani rahimahullah ta'ala, we are still in the section on istinja, and we saw that the number al-adadu fil ahjar mandub, the number related to the stones or the like toilet paper is recommended, la sunnatul mu'akkada, not an emphasized sunnah, because of we saw the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam related to that. And we also emphasized, of course, that especially with the ubiquity of access to hadith references, it is a type of ilmi irresponsibility to rely on non-hadith books for hadith. Right? So to write down to memorize a hadith from Maraqi al-Falah and to take its reference from the footnote, especially when we know that the footnotes are not reliable in pretty much any edition by default, with rare exceptions, because one can look up the hadith references, and to make sure, and that's part of the adab of ilm. And it's one's choice, right? The Prophet ﷺ promised, and these are divinely inspired promises. إنما يحمل هذا العلم وهذا الدين في كل قرن عدوله. This knowledge, this religion is only carried in each age by its udul, its most upright, right? Its most upright or its most exemplary. And there is a spiritual uprightness, there is an uprightness in character and conduct, but there is also an intellectual uprightness, which is doing things right intellectually. Right? It's at many levels. It's spiritual in conduct and character, but also there's a spiritual uprightness. And that's a promise of the Prophet. And the hadith continues, ينفون عنه, they negate the ta'wil al-ghalin, they negate the false interpretations of the excessive and the innovations of the innovators, etc. Then, that's where we stopped. Then he gives a fa of tafriya, right? That here, how does one make istinja then? And we saw, as mentioned, from Imam Tahtawi, that there are basically 4 considerations. Imam Tahtawi quotes this from Al-Kamal ibn al-Humam, and that there is no specific kayfiyya, number 1. Number 2, he quotes from Al-Mujtaba, Al-Maqsudu huwa al-Inqa. What is sought is to clean thoroughly. فَيَخْتَارُهُ مَا هُوَ الْأَبْلَغ. One does something that cleans emphatically. Right? Cleans ablag here, cleans effectively, completely. وَالْأَسْلَمْ عَنْ زِيَادَةِ التَّلْوِيثِ. Right? It does not spread the filth. Right? We mentioned overall, because there's a number of related expressions, there's 4 principal meanings. هو الإنقاء مع عدم التلويث, cleaning without spreading the filth, right? and without israf, without wastefulness, وعدم الوسوسة, and without waswasa. These are the four main matalib. So he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, فَيَسْتَنْجِي مُرِيدُ الْفَضْلِ. So the one who seeks to do things well, مُرِيدُ الْفَضْلِ, wants to do things in a virtuous way, in the better way. They make istinja بِثَلَاثَةِ أَحْجَارٍ, with 3 stones, or like 3 pieces of tissue paper. يعني بإكمال عددها ثلاثة, meaning completing the number as 3. So if إن حصل التنظيف دونه, if the area is clean with just 2 wipes, you do extra till you reach 3, or an odd number. ويختم ندبا إن حصل التنظيف أي الإنقاء دونها. You know, and this is recommended if cleanliness, meaning the removal of filth, occurs with less than 3. Then he says, وَلَمَّا كَانَ الْمَقْصُودُ هُوَ الْإِنْقَاء, when the purpose is إنقاء, cleanliness, ذكر رحمه الله تعالى كيفية يحصل بها على الوجه الأكمل. He mentioned one كيفية, one mode of cleaning by which يحصل بها الإنقاء. Right? The cleanliness takes, the area becomes clean in a complete way. على الوجه الأكمل, that fulfills the 4 criteria that we mentioned. فقال رحمه الله تعالى وكيفية الاستنجاء, the way of making istinja. This is a suggestive way that fulfills the purpose. Right? And this is a bit gruesome, so apologies in advance, but the purpose of it is, just keep track on what we play. I don't know what song. So the purpose is, for example, some people use bidet showers, like, you know, in Pakistan they call it the Muslim shower. Yeah. When we were moving into a house in Karachi, and we moved there in 2007, they said, "Would you like a Muslim shower?" Oh, I was thinking I'd like a Muhsin shower. We showered with like Tawheed or something, right? But what do you mean by Muslim shower? So, you know, the special washing. Washing off, you know? I don't. He said, you know, special washing in the washroom. Oh. So, but you know, something like that, if you turn on the nozzle really high, right? Or if you get a big lota and pour the water, filth goes all over the place. So and that's part of the wisdom of the optimal being wiping then washing. Because the wiping fulfills one of the mustahsanat of izalat al-najasa, which is at-takhfif qabla al-izala, which is to reduce before you remove. You know, if you've got filth on this table, right, if you pour water, what's going to happen? You're sloshing the filth. So it would be recommended, firstly, to reduce the filth, then to wash, in general. And there's different hadiths of that from which one sees this meaning. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina Muhammad. Okay. وكيفية الاستنجاء بالأحجار, he says, the way to make istinja with ahjar, with stones, أن يمسح الحجر الأول بادئا من جهة المقدم أي القبل إلى خلف. So that with the first stone, one begins from front, قدام, front, إلى المقدم, the front, which is القبل, إلى خلف أي backwards. Right? والثاني من خلف إلى قدام, and from the second from back to front. ويسمى إدبارا. والثالث من قدام إلى خلف, and the third from front to back. But also the consideration is that you want to reduce the amount of stones or in our time, tissue paper you want to use. But you can just keep using tissue paper till the whole place is clean. You want to do it effectively but not wastefully, right? وهذا الترتيب إذا كانت الخصية مدلاة. And this is if, what's مدلاة?
Loose or hanging.
Yeah, hanging. This is if the testicles are hanging. سواء كان صيفا أو شتاء, whether it's winter or summer. Because in winter, when it's cold, the testicles would, or the sac, or whatever it's called, which shrivel. But it's not dependent on season, dependent on state of your genital postularity. خشية تلويثها, so that you don't dirty the testicular regions. Pardon my grammatical illiteracy. وإن كانت غير مدلة, if the testicular sac is not hanging, يبتدئ من خلف إلى قدام, then one starts from back to front. لكونه أبلغ في التنظيف, because it is more emphatic in cleaning. The point is, don't get the area dirty, especially like the testicular sac and so on, then washing that area, because now you spread filth to where it wasn't. To the extent that you can, you want to limit the filth to where it was, not extend it from where there was filth. You don't want the filth to go from where it was to where it wasn't. Okay? So you go from where, slightly beyond where the filth was, reduce, right? And they suggest that as you push, like imagine if the filth is like this, so the filth has 4 areas. You want to push back such that basically you hit 2 sides of it with each one, so that you're shrinking the area of the filth with the wiping. So technically, someone could get it done with 1 piece of tissue paper, or 2, right? And then you use 3 to complete the wiping. We don't, depending of course on so many factors, but the idea is reducing waste is not spreading filth, reducing waste are 2 of the considerations, right? Now with women there's another, because there's, you don't want to, the point is you don't want to make talweeth, you don't want to spread the filth. The most obvious spreading of the filth is to the khissya, to the man, but also it will have to do with your buttock cheeks, or whatever they're called, right? Beyond, like you don't want to spread the filth all over, right? You don't want to get it unnecessarily all over your hands. Like you use, in effect, which is why one of the things that's coming up later is that that's one of the merits of squatting, because the area is more spread out, so there's less point of contact at point of release. Right? That's why it's from the sunnah to squat when relieving oneself. Right? So if someone were to, if they don't have like an Arab style toilet, if they were to get some kind of squatting stool, for example, one would be rewarded for that, because it's aqrab lis sunnah wa anfa' lil badan. It is closer to sunnah and better for one's health. Bin ghayr shak. There's reward in things like that. Right? I'm not going to mention any brand, but there's stuff like that available next day delivery online. But you cannot squat on someone else's property, of course, because the use of someone else's property. So now, the brother here gets scared about inviting you guys to his home, because these guys will squat. So don't, because use of someone else's property is limited to permission. Would you let someone squat at your house? On the toilet seat, directly. No, because it'll damage your property. And public property is more dangerous to misuse. Public property, like you can, if you're wasteful of your own property, it's disliked. If you're wasteful of someone else's property without their approval, it's sinful. If you're wasteful of public property, it is a kabira. It's a major sin. And in general, we have to be exceedingly careful on how we use public property. So in Nihayat al-Murad, Sharh Hadiyat ibn Imad, Sayyid Abdullah Nawosi says that this is one of the secrets why we see generally the Prophet ﷺ did wudu at home before he went to the masjid. And some of the fuqaha have stated that it is recommended to do that. It's safer. Right? So you're, like where you can. When you're running late, you make wudu in the masjid. No, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's safer because with your own property, you got distracted, you left the water running. It's not optimal, but it's not sinful. There's karaha, but when we go to someone else's home, we should be careful how we use their things. Our yad in it is a yad of amana. And with public property, because with public property, there's no one you can apologize to, really. So it's very, very serious. You have to be exceedingly careful on usage of anything of public property. And there's beautiful discussion of that in Hadiyat ibn Imad of Sayyid Abdul Ghani. Allah. وَالْمَرْأَةُ, now with women, you don't want to get the najasa from the rear onto her front organs by reckless cleaning habits. So, وَالْمَرْأَةُ تَبْتَدِئُ مِنْ قُدَّامٍ إِلَى خَلْفٍ. The woman begins from front to back. خَشْيَةَ تَلْوِيثِ فَرْجِهَا, out of fear of dirtying her front private parts. ثم بعد المسح يغسل يديه. Right? In some copies it says يده, but it would appear to be more correct to say يغسل يديه. What do you have? Omar?
This one says yadahu.
يده, okay. So in one copy it says يغسل يديه, and one says يغسل يده أولا. One washes one hand, and Imam al-Tahtawi says what's in the Sharh of Sayyid Abu Sa'ud al-Azhari. Now please don't, Sayyid Abu Sa'ud al-Azhari is also called al-Masri, some call it al-Azhari, Sayyid Abu Sa'ud al-Masri. This is not Abu Sa'ud who's the commentator on tafsir. Two totally different people. His commentary is actually online, you can get it from Rabbani. It's in the dual. In general, anytime it's sunnah to wash the hand, the sunnah is to wash both hands. So how many hands do we typically eat with? So let's say Zayn's an expert biryani eater. Right? He puts one hand behind his back, eats biryani with 3 fingers. Afterwards, when you go to wash, to fulfill the sunnah of washing your hands after, what do you wash? Not the 3 fingers. The sunnah is to wash both hands up to the wrists. Because you may need to use both hands. Because you're using biryani, but then Sayyid Mahmoud served a naan to you. How are you gonna, can you break a naan with one hand? Well, you'll need to use both hands. Okay? So the sunnah, both before and after, in general, when the sunnah is to wash one's hands, before eating, after eating, when they're dirty, when one wakes up from sleep, the sunnah is to wash both hands up to the wrists. That's often neglected. Some people, they'll just wash, like when they serve someone comes with the water to wash the hands, which they do because often, one, because you want to encourage people in a majlis to wash their hands after eating, and then in homes when it'd be hard for everyone to go to the washroom, especially with the women folk and so on, they bring those water, I call them the water systems, right? Like if they bring that, Some people just wash their 3 fingers. No, they wash both hands. That's أقرب إلى السنة, and the Fuqaha mentioned the adilla for that. So one washes both hands with the water, right? So regardless of whether the more authentic thing is يغسل يده or يديه, but يغسل يده, he washes his hand, أي كلتاهما, both of them, or يغسل كلتيهما, right? أولا أي ابتداء بالماء. Then one first washes one's hands with the water. So you wipe, then you don't just, so you wipe with your left hand. Now before washing, you wash your hands, right? You wash your hands. And this is also mentioned by Tahtawi, right? I'm not making that up, I promise. أولا بالماء اتقاء عن تشرب جسده الماء النجس بأول استنجاء, to avoid one's skin absorbing the najis water. And this تنزها, because, and this is in general, I learned this from some brothers in Tabligh, that if you're because they did travel to remote areas where they have limited water. So if you clean without having washed your hands first, without the hand being dry, what happened? The smell is going to stay longer on your hands. So you wet your hands first. They say even actually before making istinja, it makes sense to. That's one of the wisdoms. You wash your hands before making istinja, even with the stone. If the hands are moist, then it'll absorb less of the, like if your hands get dirty, when wiping, you get some najasa on them. Najasa on dry skin is more likely to be absorbed than najasa on wet skin. Now there's no merit in sniffing at your, right? There's people ask, what do I do if I get najasa on my nose? How do you get najasa on your nose? By smelling. And that's waswasa. Like if you're sniffing your fingers, there's no sunnah of sniffing. Right? So you wash before, then you wash after wiping, ideally. ثم يدلك المحل بالماء بباطن إصبع أو إصبعين. Then one rubs the area with water with the inside of one finger or two. The inside of one finger is what? Is this area. Not the tip of the finger. Okay? And yadluk dalk is rubbing, indicating that you are washing and rubbing. So you are not, like if you're not trying to recreate Niagara Falls to get rid of the najasa. Okay? Okay? Using one finger or two, right? Or 3 if needed, right? Okay? And how one pours and how many pourings, this is mufawwad there's no specific, like how much do you pour depends on circumstance, but don't waste water. You need very little water for things like this. Okay? And here, this Tahtawi quotes from a book called Al-Mudmarat, in Jami' al-Mudmarat, which is one of the commentaries on Huduri, precious commentary in 5 volumes, now published. With the inside of one finger or two, and inside batin al-kaf is not the tip, it's the actual length of the finger. في الابتداء أو 3 or 3 fingers إن احتاج, if one needs, إن احتاج إليها, right? Because in general one reduces the amount. There's no need to get your fingers dirty. We'll just finish the section. إن احتاج إليها فيه ويصعد الرجل إصبعه الوسطى على على غيرها. This is, some of the scholars said that a man raises their middle finger, al-wusta is the middle finger. Okay? So what are the names of the fingers? Khinsar, binsar, wusta, sababa, or musabbiha. Classic Arabic, sababa is used for sab, the accusative finger. But they call it musabbiha because they make tasbih with it. It's better. Right? Tasbih, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Is better. Tafa'ulan bil khayr. Why? Right? You don't make sab. Sab is to be avoided. Tasbih is supposed to be. So it's better to call it musabbiha. Right? Right? So khinsar, binsar, wusta, sababa or musabbiha, and ibham. Okay? If you ask me, what is it? Like ibham, abhama, you're unclear. So one raises that finger, whether you're using 2 fingers, you raise it this way, or you're using 3 fingers, you're using it this way, but you're not using the tip of the finger, you're using the length. One part of the reason, if you feel you need 2 fingers, but if you raise one, then you're primarily using 1 finger. That's the wisdom. But this is just a kayfiyya, it's not a sunnah, right? على غيرها تصعيدا قليلا, just slightly raised في ابتداء الاستنجاء, the beginning of the istinja. And also لينحدر الماء النجس من غير شيوع على جسدي, so that the najis water flows off, so you create it like a ramp. So the water flows off. If you keep your fingers like this, what's going to happen? The water is going to could channel onto your body. If you tilt your fingers like this, the water is going to flow off sideways. Okay? So again, this is the practical wisdom of the mashayikh to reduce spreading the najasa in the place, spreading the najasa on your fingers, or getting najasa onto your body. Okay? So this is practical wisdom. Apply it with discretion. Right? ثم إذا غسل قليلا يصاعد بنصره, خنصر بنصر, then one raises the binsar, ثم خنصره, ثم السبابة, right? One raises the binsar, second finger, ثم خنصره, then little finger, ثم السبابة if one really needs to. There's a lot of cleaning needed. إن احتاج ليتمكن من التنظيف, so that one is able to fulfill the purpose of cleanliness. ولا يقتصر على إصبع واحدة, one doesn't stick to just 1 finger, and there's اختلاف on this. Right? And here Imam Tahtawi says ولا يستنجي بظهور الأصابع, one does not make istinja with the tips of your fingers. One, because it's ineffective, and number 2, you end up poking yourself, right? And that's unnecessary. And this, of course, because you need your fingers for istinja, typically, whether you use hajar, but particularly when you use water. Therefore, shortening one's nails is particularly recommended. And we're not going to go into the fiqh of shortening one's nails because we're going to have to stop shortly, but that's one of those neglected discussions that people often ignore. One of the beautiful places where the ahkam of cleanliness were gathered is in Kitab Asrar al-Tahara of Imam al-Ghazali. And these are just straight up sunnahs. He mentions 10 sunnahs of cleanliness. A book that people often neglect, shockingly, because it's one of the great Imams of Islam, is the Sharh of the Ihya by Imam Muhammad Murtada al-Zabidi. And Imam Muhammad Murtada al-Zabidi is Hanafi. And he's a great Hanafi. So the useful thing is on particular fiqh sections, Zabidi will give many of the related fiqh discussions, but that section on the 10 khisal al-fitra, or the khisal al-nadafa, that in Kitab Asrar al-Tahara, the Secrets of Purity, it's actually translated into English too. That's a very useful section because it goes into the sunnahs, some of the, on trimming one's nails, one's armpit and pubic hair, the beard, other aspects of cleanliness. It's a very useful set of practical discussions. Okay, then ولا يقتصر على إصبع واحدة لأنه يورث برصا. Now baras, because it causes baras. Now baras is used, is a particular type of disease. What disease is it? What is baras? Hmm? It's like leprosy, like a skin disease, right?
It says مرضا.
What?
It says مرضا. يورث مرضا.
Yeah, sorry, good. And no, yurithu marada. Good. My misreading. I was looking, yeah. Maradan. So we'll talk about baras when we come to it. ولا يحصل به كمال النظافة. And complete cleanliness is not achieved by just one finger. Like you just wiggling the finger around the area, you want to create. But one finger, it's fine. It just والمرأة تصاعد بنصرها تصاعد بنصرها وأوسط أصابعها. She raises both the binsar, second finger, and her middle fingers معا ابتداء. From the beginning, خشية حصول اللذة. Let she unnecessarily stimulate herself. ولو ابتدأت بإصبع واحدة فربما وجب عليها الغسل. Because otherwise, if she begins with one finger, it could require ghusl. And Ibn Amir Hajj was not impressed by this discussion. Ibn Amir Hajj al-Halabi in his Sharh on Munyat al-Musalli, Halbat al-Mujalli. And of course, as a note, if anyone ever opens Hashid ibn Abdin, most of the old editions of Hashid ibn Abdin, he has it as Hilya. And that's how it is, apparently, in the manuscript copies of Hashid ibn Abdin. But it's actually Halba, Halbatul Mujalli. And Imam Tahtawi quotes Ibn Amir Hajj that this is ihtimal ba'id. It's a rare possibility. It would apply if someone is in such a state of desire that just by making istinja, someone's going to get that stimulated, then act accordingly. وإلا فلا, and if not, then not. ولم تشعر, and without realizing it. والعذراء لا تستنجي بأصابعها. And this is عند بعض الفقهاء. Right? Again, Ibn Amir Hajj didn't like this. Other fuqaha criticized this. That the adra, meaning the virgin, she does not use her fingers for istinja, بل براحة كفها. Right? By the inside of her palm. قالوا لا. The four criteria: that which cleans without spreading filth, without wasting water, and not without leading to waswasa or any other harm. Right? براحة كفها خوفا من إزالة العذرة. Right? Lest she lose her hymen. The hymen is elsewhere, and if there's fear in that, then act accordingly. ويبالغ المستنجي في التنظيف حتى يقطع الرائحة الكريهة. The one making istinja exaggerates the istinja such that the disliked smell goes. ولم يقدر بعدد, and there is no specific number for this. لأن الصحيح تفويضه إلى الرأي, that this is left to the judgment of the person who's making istinja. But there's an important principle mentioned by, not necessarily by the exact wording, but you can find it towards the end of the Tariq al-Muhammadiyya with his commentaries. It says, صاحب الوسوسة لا رأي له. And the person with waswasa has no judgment. Right? They stick to what they're supposed to do and do no more. And they say, والاحتياط لصاحب الوسوسة في ترك الاحتياط. Caution for the one who has waswasa is in leaving caution. And again, brilliant discussion on leaving waswasa in in نهاية المراد في شرح هدية بن عماد وسيد عبد الغني رحمة الله عليهم. حتى يطمئن قلبه بالطهارة, until the heart is at rest, that they're in a state of purity. This is لغير صاحب الوسوسة. بيقين, with certitude. أو غلبة الظن, or with reasonable surety. They're reasonably sure, right? هذا لصحيح الطبع. Someone أي لغير صاحب الوسوسة. وقيل, and it is said, يقدر في حق الموسوس. Okay? And there's اختلاف, is it الموسوس or الموسوس? Imam al-Tahtawi says is بالفتح الموسوس. Ibn Abdin does tahqiq of this and says no, it is الموسوس. Because هو يحدث نفسه بالوسوسة. Right? Because the shaitan casts the waswasa in them. But it is who does the taraddud come from? Is لصاحب الوسوسة. So he is الموسوس. وموسوس نفسه بما ألقى فيه الشيطان. Right? يعني هو يحدث نفسه. Right? The shaitan is not talking to you. Shaitan is a troublemaker. He throws the thought into you. What do? Don't engage. Simple. Okay. Imam al-Saraqsi, Sahib al-Mabsut, has an amazing quote in his Mabsut. He says, السبيل في الوسوسة قطعها وعدم الالتفات إليها. The only way, السبيل, the only way with waswasa is to cut it off. Because I mean, if you have waswasa about istinja, don't cut off your own work. Cut it off, meaning cut off the waswasa. Don't get bad ideas. Is to get rid of it, is to remove the waswasa and to pay no attention to it. The problem is people try to make tahqiq of the waswasa. You get a bad thought, as Sheikh Adib would say about waswasa in aqidah, الوساوس ما بدها دليل وما بدها حجة. And someone, the waswasa comes, right? It's like, you took a shower, you put on deodorant, you leave home, someone says you stink. Should you sniff your armpits? No. Waswasa. You're showing up at an interview, someone wants to make you look bad, so you're all sitting for the interview, they're staring at you. They say, you stink. Are you going to really smell yourself for what you have self-respect? You took a shower, your shirt is clean. Right? You don't pay attention to waswasa. So, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam. Right? وقيل يقدر في حق الموسوس with a كسرة ب7 أو 3. Now, قيل, but this is تقدير, and this is very useful. Now he says قيل is sometimes indicates ضعف هذا القول, but sometimes it's a lesser opinion. Because the asl حتى لصاحب الوسوسة would be العمل بالظن, is to use your judgment. But sometimes you can't. You tell someone just until you're at rest, but they're not at rest. So you tell them stick to 3. Then why would the ulama mention 7? Because some people they have so much waswasa, if you say only do 3 on their own, they won't be able to stick to only 3. So it's okay, 7, right? They just need to be cautious. They say beyond 7, there's no allowance. You got it. With people of waswasa, you have to gently shake them up a little bit. And they took the 7 from up to 7 is recommended. ولوغ الكلب في الإناء, the dog drinking from a container. The Prophet ﷺ said it to wash it 7 times. That's mubalagha. So up till 7, mubalagha is accepted from the sunnah. Right? ب7 أو 3. وقيل في الإحليل ب3 وفي المقعدة ب5, and some said 3 times with respect to the front male organ, and in the rear with 5. وقيل ب7 وقيل ب10. These are other opinions, right? But the idea is the person who has waswas, he said them, do this, only this, and no more. ويبالغ في إرخاء المقعدة. Right? One exaggerates in opening one's legs. ليزيل ما في الشرج. To remove that which is at the point of exit بقدر الإمكان. Because if your feet are close together, then there are obstacles at the point of exit. Najasa is going to get in contact with those obstacles. And that, of course, is also why a neglected adab of self-cleaning is that one does not simply trim front pubic hair, but also rear pubic hair. Because it is أنظف وأبعد من تعلق النجاسة بالمقعدة. Right? Because it is cleaner and less likely to cause najasa to get stuck upon usage of one's faculties. إن لم يكن صائما, if one is not fasting, والصائم لا يبالغ, the fasting person doesn't open their legs too much, but that's أدبا حفظا للصوم عن الفساد, so that one does not corrupt one's fast. It is very difficult for water to go up so high that it would break your fast, because the extent that the water would have to go inside with certitude is قدر الحقنة, to the extent of a suppository, which is the extent basically of one finger. They differ 2 digits or 3, but like a lot. Right? ويحترز أيضا عن إدخال الإصبع مبتلة, and one avoids also to insert a wet finger, meaning into one's rear orifice, whatever it's called, لأنه يفسد الصوم, because this would break the fast only if one inserted it fully. One does not pry a finger into any organ to remove filth from it, because one only removes filth from what's outside, not from what's inside. Right? And so this Ibn al-Takhtawi corrects this point, and you can see the correction in فإذا فرغ من الاستنجاء بالماء غسل يده. Once one finishes making istinja with water, one washes one's hands a second time. ونشف مقعدته or مقعدته, and then one dries one's rear area, the area that was washed. That is more hygienic. قبل القيام, before standing up. لئلا تجذب المقعدة شيئا من الماء, so that the maq'ad does not absorb any of the water. إذا كان صائما, if one is standing. So this is, one is أنظف, and it's as if إذا كان صائما خاصة إذا كان صائما, especially if one is fasting. Even if it was dripping wet and you stood up, the water is not going to go up enough to validate the fast under any possibility. But this is أدبا. ويستحب لغير الصائم, so he says, because the method could be read that this is specific to the person fasting. But he said, but this also recommended for other than the fasting person, حفظا للثوب عن الماء المستعمل, to guard the thobe from used water. Now, what if you can't make istinja? Someone's, for example, got into an accident. They decided to ride a bike and they got in an accident, both their hands are injured. So right at the end of Takhtawi's section, comments on this section, he says, Faraq, fil khaniya, and the khaniya, which is Fatawa Qadi Khan. The Fatawa Qadi Khan are amazing. Qadi Khan, if you see Sharh Qudras al-Mufti of Ibn Abidin, he quotes, أنهم قالوا لا يفتى بخلاف قاضي خان. One does not give fatwa contrary to Qadi Khan. And Qadi Khan was essentially a contemporary of Imam al-Marghinani, right? The breaths of divine inayah at that time. Although bizarrely, Fatawa Qadi Khan are also printed in the classical edition of Al-Fatawa al-Hindiya in the margins, but it says that Qadi Khan died in the year 285 or something like that, which would be miraculous. Because if he died in the year 285, he's quoting people 100, 200, and nearly 300 years after his death, which would be an amazing miracle. Right? Right? It's like Sidi Hamza writing a book now, quoting his great-grandchildren. And their great-grandchildren. Doesn't happen. It's a mystery. Never take the names of authors from the covers of books or the inside cover. Because you don't know who put that together. That's not a... Right? التزام الصحة في النقل من شروط العلم الموثوق. Right? Being careful to verify what you're quoting. Am I quoting from a reliable place? Don't make assumptions about reliability. Things are not reliable until proven reliable. So it says in the Khaniya, Fatawa Qadi Khan, but he died in the late 500s, 580 something. مريض عجز عن الاستنجاء. A sick person, unable to make istinja. They got into an accident, for example. نسأل الله العافية. ولم يكن له من يحل له جماعه سقط عنه الاستنجاء. And there's no one there with whom intimate relations are permissible, spouse. They don't have to make istinja. The spouse does not have to clean them. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not make a soul responsible for more than its capacity. The wus'a, which is like istita'a, its own capacity. They say there's a legal principle. التكليف بقدر الوسع. Moral responsibility is in accordance with one's own capacity. So Imam Abu Hanifa has a principle here that المرء قادر بقدرة نفسه لا بقدرة غيره. A person is able by their own ability, not by another's ability. So let's say Zubayr was lost in thought of Zubaydah, and he walked into the wall here at the new Seekers and got hurt. So now he can't get up to make wudu in the hospital. Not allowed to make wudu on the hospital bed, let's say. Does he have to get a nurse to help him go to the washroom to make wudu? Does he? No. Because you're able with your own ability. And this is rahmah. And a lot of times you go to a hospital and some Muslims are, someone like, the person is like collapsing, falling over, and they're going making wudu. And they say, you have to wash your feet, come on. Right? Stick your foot in a tub of water. And they're falling, like, gets really dramatic. Now, if there's someone to help, great. If not, if they can't, without undue hardship or undue fear of harm, do it themselves, then this is عدم وجدان القدرة على الماء. One does not find the ability to use water, one makes tayammum. If you don't have the ability to make istinja, سقط عنه. And that's excused till that opportunity comes so someone can come and they clean them up normally. And these are, and we'll look a lot more at this when we come to the section on removal of filth. That very often, especially with ongoing caretakers, if someone has a disability, etc. at home, say, okay, the family can help, but it becomes really difficult for the family to help. It becomes a grave burden on them. And then the sick person feels really bad because they want to pray, but they have to, this elderly man was saying, I yearn to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but I get up in the middle of the night, but if I were to pray, I'd have to wake up my wife. So she can make, I feel very bad for her because she's taking care of me all day. And uncle was like very old and auntie was almost as old as him. He almost jumped out of his like wheelchair or whatever he was on to hug me. I said, uncle, you can just make them so happy. So happy for his wife, first and foremost. Number two, so he can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So don't make things difficult for people. But of course, don't give dispensations, just blindly. Right? So that's why learning is important. Right? But you cannot get a third party to look at your. So in that case, for example, let's say it's a Muslim hospital. You're a wealthy, you're a wealthy businessman hospitalized. Can you ask the nurse to do istinja for you? No. Istinja is not a necessity. The prohibition of uncovering one's nakedness is greater than the sunnah of istinja. So it's lifted. Wallahu a'lam. And here, inshallah, we will share the adab of dukhul al-khala from Hashim bin Abdin, which are taken from the Muqaddimah al-Ghaznawiyya with the sharh of, with its sharh, al-Diya al-Ma'nawi fi sharh Muqaddimah al-Ghaznawi. And this is one of the, we mentioned, one of the other great early texts in Ibadat. You have al-Muqaddimah al-Ghaznawiyya, al-Muqaddimat al-Faqih Abu al-Layth al-Samarqandi. And then he says, talks about what you can make istinja with and what is disliked with. We'll be pausing for 10 minutes for Maghrib for those of you who are online, and we'll be coming back after that. Ta'ala.
That was mostly harmless.
One of my least enjoyable sections. Someone give any?
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
It exudes a lot of heat.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
قامها الله وأدامها ما دامت السماوات والأرض وجعلنا للصلاة فيها. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والتين والزيتون وطور سينين وهذا البلد الأمين. لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم ثم رددناه أسفل سافلين إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات فلهم أجر غير ممنون. فما يكذبك بعد بالدين أليس الله بأحكم الحاكمين. الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة
didn't say it was. I didn't I heard something very different. I heard halaka. So, hal anta? I like to be.
لا لا بأس.
فهو عامل سهل يعني محمد نصار
لكن على الأقل it's worth that لا أقول إنه ضحك يعني خلاص نهاية الكلام في الموضوع بس إني يعني ضحك Okay, Bismillah. Keep an eye on the focus. There may be some dramatic message from please don't ever do this. Even if we need a longer extension cable or something. Okay, Bismillah. Not right now. Okay, Alhamdulillah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. فصل فيما يجوز به الاستنجاء وما يكره به وما يكره فعله. Okay, section on what is permissible to use for istinja, and what's disliked, and those actions that are disliked. Okay? And this is of course connected to what's before. So as Imam Tahtawi may say, أي حالة قضاء الحاجة, when relieving oneself. Okay? And that's obvious. Right? قال رحمه الله تعالى لا يجوز كشف العورة للاستنجاء. It is not permitted to uncover one's aura for istinja. What's meant by this is what? This is going to be really freaked out when I became Hanafi. You cannot uncover your aura when you're relieving yourself. How do you do istinja? This is lil ghayr, for others. Right? So you're camping, right? And there, you know, the Sheikh Hamza Chaudhry, not Sheikh Hamza Maqbool, so Sheikh Hamza Khan, Sheikh Hamza Chaudhry, like he has a few students who won't leave him alone. Says, I'm going to the toilet, so we're coming with you. He has to make sure they don't come with him because he can't uncover in front of them. Right? Neither to relieve himself, nor to, of course now, to relieve yourself, if people won't leave you, it's haja tabi'iyya. If you really need to go, you gotta go, and the sin would be upon them. But if you can't leave where people are, you can forego doing istinja. Now, if they're upright people, like, and this would happen someplace in prison, for example, two people sharing a cell, you would ask the person that can you please turn around, right? And if you trust them, then you could uncover. لحرمته كشف العورة أمام الغير, because of the impermissibility of uncovering one's aura in front of another. والفسق به, and because uncovering one's aura in front of another is fisq, is corruption. Now, not every uncovering of the aura is necessarily making a person a fasiq. That's a deeming someone a fasiq is a serious religious ruling. So don't do that. Right? If you read in a book that if someone smokes, smoking is fisq, doesn't mean the one who smokes is a fasiq. That's a hukm shar'i upon a person. Are you a mufti? No. Are you a qadi? No. Then no. Simple, right? فلا يرتكبه لإقامة السنة. So one does not take on something prohibited to establish a sunnah, right? Okay? Because Imam Tahtawi mentions here a number of legal principles. One is لأن درء المفاسد مقدم على جلب المصالح غالبا, right? Because prevention of harm is given precedence in the Sharia over the attainment of benefit. غالبا, generally. Right? Number one. Number two, واعتناء الشرع بالمنهيات أشد من اعتنائه بالمأمورات. And the concern of the sacred law, of divine guidance, with leaving the prohibited is more intense than its concern for doing the commanded. لهذا قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ما نهيتكم عنه فاجتنبوه. Whatever I have forbidden you, keep away from it completely. اجتناب. وما أمرتكم به فأتوا منه ما استطعتم. And whatever I have commanded you, do of it as much as you can. This is one of the hadiths in the 40 Nawawi, and many of the commentators on, because it's a very important principle, the principle of being very careful to avoid the harm and doing one's best to do the good. But of course there's balance. There's balance because caution is based on ilm, not on wasawis. Of the best and most structured commentaries on this hadith in an accessible format is the popular Damascus commentary for high school students of the Arba'in al-Nawawiyya called al-Wafi fi Sharh al-Arba'in al-Nawawiyya, of a number of distinguished Damascus scholars. Al-Wafi fi Sharh al-Arba'in al-Nawawiyya, and it structures it in a number of points. If you're really lazy, just read the titles and you get the gist of what's being said. But there are numerous lessons in this hadith. Anyways, also, this relates to قواعد الضرر, the principles of harm. Right? The main principle of harm is الضرر يزال, harm is removed. Right? A principle related to that, a corollary of it is الضرر يزال بقدر الإمكان, harm is lifted to the extent possible. But then لا يزال الضرر بالضرر, harm is not lifted by harm. Now what if there are two harms? يدفع الضرر الأدنى الأعلى بارتكاب الضرر الأدنى. One wards off the greater harm by accepting the lesser harm. So here, if there's the harm of leaving the sunnah and the harm of leaving a fard, one would and of course sometimes you can avoid both. You would accept the harm of leaving the sunnah in order not to fall in the greater harm of leaving the fard, which is the fard of not uncovering one's awrah. I need just a minute.
There was a guy.
principles of avoiding harm are important to note. Okay? But the principle that we mentioned, that يدفع الضرر بقدر الإمكان. Harm is lifted to the extent possible, which is why he says, right? ويمسح المخرج من تحت الثياب. One could clean the area from under one's clothing, right? Meaning in front of other people, right? That those crazy students won't leave you alone. So if you can do it under clothing, أي من غير مشقة ولا ضرر, without hardship, then one does so. بنحو حجر, by, for example, limiting oneself to stone or toilet paper. وإن تركه صحت الصلاة بدونه. But if one were to leave that, the prayer would be valid. And there's some things that might not occur to everybody. Right? So, see, Mahmoud's really smart. He can figure out solutions to most problems. But Brother Bob is not the sharpest bulb in the box. And he doesn't figure out these kinds of solutions. So, you'll be excused. وَإِن تَجَاوَزَتِ النَّجَاسَةُ مَخْرَجَهَا. If the najasa goes beyond the point of exit, then now this is no longer istinja. Now that which is beyond the point of exit is izalatul najasa, is removal of filth. Right? Istinja relates to that which is at and immediately around the point of exit. Roughly the extent of a dirham, like we said, inner palm, right? وزاد المتجاوز بانفراده على قدر الدرهم وزنا في المتجسدة ومساحة في المائعة لا تصح معه الصلاة. If the filth goes beyond the point of exit and it goes beyond the extent of a dirham, and that's just we do not consider what's on the point of exit, because that has the ruling of istinja, and its hukum is sunnatu izalatihi, right? Or taqlidi. Sunnah of its removing or cleaning. That's one of the reasons they call it sunnatu inqa'ihi, the sunnah of cleaning it, because izala we use for izalatul najasa, removal of filth. But this here, that they call cleaning the point of exit, not removing filth from it, just to distinguish between the two processes. Istinja, removal of filth. Although in istinja you are removing filth. So if it goes beyond the extent of a dirham by weight in solid filth and by area in liquid filth, prayer is not valid with it. Why? Because one of the conditions for the validity of prayer is for طهارة الثوب والبدن والمكان عن النجاسة إلا القدر المعفو عنه. Is for one's clothes, one's body, and one's place of prayer to be free of filth, except for the extent that is excused. And this is understood, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands in the Quran, وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, and your clothes purify. So this is ibaratul nas, by the expression of the text with respect to clothing. Now if you have to purify your clothing, a fortiori, you would be expected to be free of filth in your body. And that's bidilalatil nas. It's a shared meaning, so that's understood from the text itself. And this entails that where you are in contact with on the ground of the prayer, that be free of filth. All three are understood from Allah's command, وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ. And there's great spiritual meanings in that verse. وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, your garments purify. Okay. And Shadili about, used to wonder for a long time about what is meant by وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, purifying your garments, and the 5 levels of purification. Because what are my garments? He had a vision of the Prophet and said, Ya Rasulullah, وَمَا ثِيَابِ, what are my garments? I said, your garments are 5. There's 5 levels of spiritual purification with respect to them. That's a separate matter. لِزِيَادَتِهِ عَلَى الْقَدْرِ الْمَعْفُوِ عَنْهُ, because if the filth that is beyond the point of exit, if it's more than a dirham, this is more than the extent that's مَعْفُوِ عَنْهُ, that is excused. وإذا, this is conditioned by something. إِذَا وَجَدَ مَا يُزِيلُهُ, if one finds something to clean it with. So let's say someone was stuck in the toilet and they shut down the center. They went to their kid's baseball game, they got stuck in the washroom. Turns out the caretaker shut down the place, locked the washroom. Because the caretaker is afraid of jinn. So he locked the washroom. Guy stuck in the washroom, there's no water and no toilet paper. So what does he do? And he got filth on himself. And he still has to pray Isha. Right? Then that filth would be excused. إِذَا وَجَدَ مَا يُزِيلُهُ, meaning إِذَا لَمْ يَجِدْ مَا يُزِيلُهُ, if one does not find what one could remove the filth with, then لا يجب. وَلَوْ كَثُرَتِ النَّجَاسَةِ, even the filth is excessive. Right? So إِذَا كَذَا إِذَا وَجَدَ مَا يُزِيلُهُ, it's understood, this is mafhum, that if one إِذَا لَمْ يَجِدْ لَا يَجِبْ, if one did not find, then it's not necessary to remove it, and one's prayer would be valid with it in that case. من مائع أو ماء, whether liquid or water. ويحتال لإزالته من غير كشف العورة عند من يراه. And ويحتال, احتيال, has very negative usages in Arabic too. احتيال is that one uses whatever stratagem, literally trick. Like one does one's best here. One does one's best to remove the filth without uncovering one's aura if surrounded by people who can see one. Right? تحرزا عن ارتكاب المحرم بالقدر الممكن, in order to avoid falling into the haram to the extent possible. So of course, a simple thing, people ask sometimes, is one of those bid'ah tabiha, that some people, like gym and so on, people go, and the people walking around buck naked there. And some people say, well, I got to change as well. So they'll change and just hope nobody sees them. Can't do that. Because you cannot cover your aura in a public place. Number one. Number two, being in a place where other people are naked is not permissible. Right? إِلَّا مُرُورًا, unless you just pass by there when unavoidable. When unavoidable. If someone is playing sports or whatever, it's not okay. Uncovering aura, even in front of someone of the opposite sex, is a major sin. Right? And just because people think it's normal, it's not normal. وإذا لم يزد إلا بالضم لما في المخرج فلا يضر تركه. If it is not more than a dirham, except by consideration of what's on the point of exit, then it does not harm to leave removing it. لأن ما في المخرج ساقط الاعتبار, because that which is on the makhraj, on the point of exit, is not of consideration when we consider the excusable amount of filth. Because there's two rulings. You could diagram what's on the point of exit. This is not izalat al-najasa, this is istinja. Izalat al-najasa applies to all that is beyond it. Okay. Now this ما في المخرج ساقط الاعتبار, this is the relied upon position in the madhab, there is a weaker opinion that the excusable amount would also, the consideration of the excusable amount of filth would include what's on your private parts of filth. If someone got stuck, not able to remove it, and that's caution. Although it's a weaker position, but it has a basis. But there is that difference of opinion there. So if someone wants to be cautious, they could. Okay. So that's the issue of uncovering one's aura. Then you could put a subtitle here, مَا يُكْرَهُ بِهِ الْإِسْتِنْجَاء. What is disliked to use for istinja? So he says, وَيُكْرَهُ الْإِسْتِنْجَاء. In general, what does one avoid? One avoids things بِغَيْرِ الْمُزِيلِ. That one does not remove the najasa. Okay? Or that which مَا يَشِيعَ النَّجَاسَ, or that which spreads the filth rather than removing it. Okay? Use a soft sponge and it just wiggles the najasa around. So that does not remove the filth or spreads the filth. Okay? Or that has material value. Okay? Or is respected. Or, which would include like clothing. If Bilal got stuck in the toilet and there's nothing to remove the filth with, should he take off his shirt, take off his undershirt and make istinja with his undershirt and then throw it away? No, because you are wasting your property. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade ida'at al-mal. Okay? On the tongue of his Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that's considered tabdhir. Right? There's waste, which is using something beyond need. استعمال الشيء وراء قدر الحاجة. And there's tabdhir, which is squandering things, which is using them where there is no benefit nor purpose, right? Or ruining that which is of value, or ruining that which is of value. So, don't, so that's why this is mentioned, right? Or that is ta'am, وَلَوْ لِغَيْرِ آدَمِي, or that is food, even if it's for other than a human being. Okay. وَيُكْرَهُ الْإِسْتِنْجَاء بِعَظْمٍ. It is makruh to make istinja with bones. And what do you have in your copies, Omar? After بِعَظْم, what do you have? Yep, al-Mu'tamad. Huh? Omar, what do you have?
I just have وَرَوْثٍ قَوْلِهِ.
بِعَظْمٍ, the method ends there.
Yep.
Yep, al-Mu'tamad sticking there. Do you have it? Yeah, some copies have the word al-Mu'tamad. What does it say? Yeah, so some of the copies of the Maraqi have the word al-Mu'tamad, which is redundant there. Even if you don't have it, you put a note. في بعض النسخ زيادة لفظ المعتمد. There's an extra word المعتمد and زيادة. Crept in somewhere. So it's makruh to make istinja with bone, because bone is even animal bone, because bone we know from authentic hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is طعام إخوانكم من الجن, that it is food for your brethren of the jinn, and this is from the matters of the unseen. How is it from their food? The ulama came up with all kinds of possibilities. That there's, like, when you eat what's on the bone, Allah creates meat now for the jinn. All kinds of different possibilities. We have no evidence of any such thing. It's food for them. Now, some of the ulama speculate that just as there's a karama to the human being, there's a karama to animals too, right? And to their bones. Like, okay, we needed their meat, so we ate them. But they died, that you respect the animals even upon on their death. Right? Wallahu a'lam. But the hadith, the Prophet forbade making istinja with bones. Okay? And the hadith is in Sunan Nasa'i al-Kubra and elsewhere. Waroth, and likewise excrement, because it's filthy. And one of the other principles related to the principle of darar yuzal is la yuzalu dararu bil darar. You don't remove harm by harm. والنجاسة لا تزول بالنجس. Right? Filth is not lifted by filth. لقوله عليه الصلاة والسلام لا تستنجوا بالروث ولا بالعظام. Don't make istinja with excrement nor with bones. فإنهما, because the two of them are, we have فإنهما, right? زادوا إخوانكم من الجن. They are from the provision of your brethren of the jinn. فإذا وجدهما فإذا وجدوهما, if the jinn find them, صار العظم كأن لم يؤكل. If the jinn find bones, they become as if they were uneaten. فيأكلونه, so they eat it, either the bone itself or what was on the bone. And that's none of our business. وصار الروث شعيرا, and the excrement becomes like barley. There's not textual basis for this. وتبنا لدوابهم, and becomes like straw for their animals. هذا قال بعض الصالحين من السلف, some of the righteous of the Salaf said that, Allahu A'lam, معجزة للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, as a miracle for the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, because the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم came as mercy for the humans and mercy for the jinn. And it's not easy being a jinn. And alhamdulillah they made us human, and some of the ulama wrote books about ahkam al-jan. Among them, from the Hanafis, al-Shilbi, or Ibn al-Shilbi, ahkam al-marjan fi ahkam al-jan, and Imam al-Suyuti took that and made a Shafi'i version. It's structured according to all the chapters of fiqh. What's the fiqh related to jinn? In tahara, salah, siyam, zakat, and every chapter there are ahkam related to jinn. And some of these things are done as curiosities for knowledge. Like you're tired for a whole day of just fiqhing around, and then you could read something about the fiqh of jinn. Kind of like, legal relaxation. Okay? But of course we have more important things. So you got to read a book of fiqh. Don't read the fiqh of jinn, read the fiqh of humans first. Allah. وَالنَّهْيُ يَقْتَضِي كَرَاهَةَ التَّحْرِيمِ, and the prohibition, particularly as this prohibition relates to what? To limits and allowance and non-allowance, entails that this is makruh tahriman. ولا يستنجي بعظم وطعام, nor with وطعام لآدمي أو بهيمة, nor with food for a human or an animal. للإهانة والإسراف, because this is, this is disrespecting and wasting a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وطعام يحترم. Food is treated with respect. One doesn't throw bread around. There's bread on the ground, one picks it up. Right? One doesn't allow bread to go to waste. Other food wastage is a serious thing because it's a blessing. وَالنِّعَمْ لَا تُهَانْ وَلَا تُزْدَرَ وَلَا تُسْرَفْ. Right? Blessings are not disrespected, they're not neglected, and they're not wasted. وَقَدْ نَهَى عَنْهُ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ, and the Prophet forbade using the food of humans or animals for istinja. Where would this arise? When you're out of water, let's say you're stuck in a situation where there's no stones or anything to make istinja with, prison. They serve lunch, I can use the bread for istinja, no. It'd be less harmful to leave the istinja than to use food for it. وآجر, right? What is آجر? بمد الهمزة وضم الجيم وتشديد الراء المهملة. فارسي المعرب. It's originally a Persian word that's معرب, that has been Arabized. وهو الطوب, and this is called طوب بلغة أهل مصر. By the look, in the usage of the Egyptians, ويقال له آجور. Because it's Arabized, so you can also call it آجور. على وزن فاعول. اللبن المحرق. It's cooked bricks. Okay? Cooked mud bricks. I could imagine using bricks to make istinja. It's gonna, right? فلا ينقي. Firstly, it doesn't clean. ويؤذيه, and it harms it. Number two, this is an item of value. Because like a brick or a piece of brick, use it for construction and stuff. فيكره, it's disliked. وخزف صغار الحصى, and little pebbles, because they don't fulfill the purpose. فلا ينقي, it doesn't clean. أنقى ينقي, right? ويلوث, and it'll make it dirty. It'll make the area dirty and your hands dirty. ويلوث اليد. وفحم, and coal. Be a colorful way of trying to remove najasa, but again ineffective. لتلويثه, because it dirties it, and also coal is of value. Now some people said that coal is all, you can use coal for brushing your teeth. And there's fatwa related to that. It's become actually quite popular. And Desis used to use it. You can buy it online now, sold for premium. If someone wants to do some the arbitrage or whatever it's called, go to Indian stores, buy, what's called manjan or whatever, right? They use, I don't know if you know about it, they use coal powder to brush teeth, charcoal powder. It's sold like a little pot for like $18-20. I got slapped at the back of the head because I was overheard described. I bought some of it. People have it. People have been using it for a long time. It's very popular. They say it's good for your gums. Anyways, it's permitted because it dirties the private areas, but it's not impermissible for use in other ways. Anyways, wazujaj, and glass. If you use a flat part, it won't clean. Use a sharp part, you're nuts. وزجاج وجس. What's jis? Plaster. لأنه يضر بالمحل, because it would harm the area or be ineffective, depending on if it's sharp or soft. وشيء محترم, and anything worthy of respect. لتقومه, because it has value, material value, right? So clothing, for example, or paper, right? Other than toilet paper. كخرقة ديباج, like a piece of silk, or any other. القيد بالديباج is just اتفاقي, because some wealthy people got this idea that we will have silk istinja tools. So that's waste of wealth. وقطن, or cotton, again precious. لإتلاف المالية, because of destroying matters of value. والاستنجاء بها يورث الفقر, and making istinja with such things leads to poverty, because من شكر النعم فقد قيدها بعقالها. Whoever is grateful for blessings ties them down as they deserve to be tied down. وإلا فقد تعرض لزوالها. And if one does not, then one has made oneself susceptible to losing a blessing, to losing them. Right? نسأل الله العافية. That applies to any blessings. Okay? ويعفو عن كثير, and Allah overlooks much. ويكره الاستنجاء باليد اليمنى. It is disliked. This is مكروه تنزيها. It is somewhat disliked to use the right hand, and it's bad adab, but it's not prohibited. If someone said, you know, my left hand tickles when I use it for istinja, so I use my right hand. So in a public gathering, you couldn't tell them that don't do that, that's wrong. Right? Because correcting them publicly is disrespecting them. That's far worse than they're doing something somewhat disliked. If one does so, you have to do it من باب النصح مع اللطف والاحترام, with gentleness and respect. You cannot condemn someone for doing something that is permissible. لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا بال أحدكم فلا يمسح ذكره بيمينه. If one of you urinates, let them not touch their organ with their right hand. وإذا أتى الخلاء فلا يتمسح بيمينه. And if they enter the toilet, they should not clean themselves with their right hand. وإذا شرب فلا يشرب نفسا واحدا. And if they drink, they should not drink with one breath. Right? And Imam al-Tahtawi here quotes Imam Badruddin al-Aini's Sharh Sahih al-Bukhari, where he mentions that it's makruh tanzihan to use the right hand for cleaning one's private parts, because prohibitions relate to meanings. The ulama looked at this. What is the meaning in using the right hand? One is there is tark. You need tark sunnah, because the sunnah is to do noble things with the right hand, less noble things with the left hand. Leaving the sunnah is makruh tanzihan, it's not makruh tahriman. Number one, right? And then the other is to express respect to the right hand, and respecting the right hand is an adab. It's not a matter of obligation. So there's no meaning in it of prohibition. It's karahat tanzih. That's why the principle that we mentioned from al-Khadimi and others, al-aslu fi al-nahi, والأصل أن النهي إذا ورد في الآداب والهيئات كان للتنزيه. The basis is that a prohibition, if it comes, الأصل أن السنة إذا أطلقت في الآداب والهيئات. So that's my fault. الأصل أن السنة إذا أطلقت في الآداب والهيئات. The basis is that the term sunnah is used in matters of adab and comportment, of the right way of doing something. It relates to recommendation, not emphasis. And the opposite is understood from that, that if karaha is related to propriety and the right way of doing something, it would be for tanzih, not for tahreem. Because you can't self-fatwa yourself, right? But these are guiding principles to help us along the way. And he says, and of course, when they quote something like this, don't just, if someone has a modicum of himma, he quotes Imam Badruddin al-Aini, go and see what Imam al-Aini says, we might find other things of benefit there. Imam al-Aini has a number of other good points there, but I'll leave those to you. So the Prophet ﷺ, and do not drink with one breath. فلا يشرب نفسا واحد, don't drink in one breath. The sunnah with drinking is to drink in sips and not gulps. And between sips to take a breath. So even some people think that, okay, I go. So you drank in sips, but did you take a breath? Like you went. Right? So he drank in sips, but he didn't breathe in between. Right? So once one of the great scholars of the Indian subcontinent came to Amman, so a few of us went to visit, student knowledge. He just started drinking water, and Sheikh Amjad Rashid, Shafi'i Faqih, suddenly looked really happy, and he went outside, like he went to the corridor, and walked out of the room, in the corridor, walked around really happy, and came back in. What are you doing? You stepped out again. And he was like, we're relaxed, we're just food or whatever. He says, you see how he's drinking? Wallah ajib. هكذا وصفه الفقهاء. That's how the fuqaha described it. Because the fuqaha, when they do sharh of the hadith of drinking with breaths, and also hadith about not breathing into a hot liquid, particularly. Right? They say that one should move the cup away from one's mouth. And they say there's three meanings in it. One, تحقيقاً للتنفس. One, to make sure you breathe. Number two, so you don't breathe into it, particularly with hot drinks, because they say it increases the germs, and there's prophetic discouragement. But thirdly, so that it حتى لا يشعر بزيادة الحرص, so that one's not too avid. Just as the sunnah is, when you take a bite to eat, you don't extend your hand until you swallowed that bite. And these are the adab of ta'am and adab al-akl, and the numerous adab. Years ago, Sheikh Yahya said, Sidi, isn't the section on adab al-ta'am and the Ihya just amazing? He said, everything in it's amazing. In the Ihya, says, man, it's so full of wisdom. I said, you've read it before, haven't you? Yeah, but isn't this amazing? There's so much wisdom in all these things. It's not being pedantic, right? These are beautiful meaning. These the sunan and the adab, they beautify our religious conduct, but also our life, if we do them properly. Anyways, so إِلَّا مِنْ عُذْرٍ, unless there's an excuse, right? One does not make istinja with the right unless there's an excuse. One broke one's left hand. One sprained it. إِلَّا مِنْ عُذْرٍ بِالْيُسْرَ فَيَسْتَنْجِي بِصَبِّ خَادِمٍ أَوْ مِنْ مَاءٍ جَارٍ. So then one could get a servant to pour water. This would be, without looking. Or one does what one can. One pours water and then one does the best one can. Or from flowing water. Now flowing water, right, would be a large stream of flowing water. You need, but they said, إن كان بحيث لا يتأذى الغير. This would only be if others would not. If it's a small stream, someone relieved themselves far away and then they went into the water to do istinja. Downstream, not too far away, are some villagers washing their clothes. If they knew, would they be comfortable? No. But if it's a big river, nobody cares. Right? So, إذا الناس is to be avoided. Inconveniencing others is to be avoided. And then he says, وَيَدْخُلُ الْخَلَاء, and then one enters the toilet. And we'll stop there بإذن الله. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. One of the poets said, قلت لهم يا كرام هل ترضوا بحالي? I said to them, O noble ones, are you content with my state? فقالوا لي يا غلام إن كنت خالي. They said to me, O youth, if you come to us empty. Okay? Ya kiram, O noble ones, but in fact, it's addressing the one beloved, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Arabs, very often they use the plural for tasattur. متايا يعني متايا kiram, when, O noble ones. What do they mean one. Right? Ya ahibbati, O my loved ones. There's no loved ones, there's one beloved. All these are tasattur. Right? It's all to try to hide who the beloved is.